Chu Li traveled to a different continent and discovered that it was a world full of nations. Da Zhou, Da Yin, Da Qin, Da Chu opposing each other and constantly fighting. Behind each kingdom, there are various sections: a Taoist school that has proven immortality, a Buddhist school that is compassionate and helps the world, a Mohist school that skillfully changes its mechanisms, and a military school that uses warfare to stop killing. Chu left the bureau and joined the notorious Zhou detective organization, awakening his golden finger. From then on, I began my life of stirring up the world. Feilu Novel Network reminds you that this novel and its characters are purely fictional. If there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental and should not be imitated. Chapter 1. Rebirth of the Zhou Dynasty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Dazhou, Linen City. In the dilapidated room, Chu Li sat at a table. Looking at the neatly stacked black uniform and the long black scabbard sword in front of me, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. I just had a few more drinks at a classmate gathering, and in a daze, I crossed over here. The original body that he replaced was also called Chu Li. He was an orphan without a father or mother. He held a position as a wicked person in the Zhou dynasty and had the power to walk with a sword. Bad people are special institutions established by the Zhou dynasty, responsible for investigating cases, while also having the power to supervise officials and civilians. There are 4 levels of delinquent individuals: deacon, helmsman, protector, and delinquent commander. Chu Li is the most inexperienced deacon. The monthly salary is only 3 taels of silver, excluding daily expenses. It can only be considered as food and clothing. Chu Li has learned that this is a world of flourishing martial arts, with various martial arts heroes emerging one after another. Those martial arts masters have the power to move mountains and fill the sea, just like the legendary heavenly beings. You can enter a country's worship hall, and both treatment and status are transcendent. But these things are still far away for him. Along the journey of Gain martial arts, excluding talent, the required resource consumption is astronomical. The daily dietary supplements, the cost of hiring a martial artist, not to mention the top-notch techniques that are priceless in the entire world. Chu Li's original identity lies in the path of martial arts. Although he may have some talent, it is due to his poor background and lack of strong family and sect support. Therefore, the advancement in martial arts is always limited, and after so many years, it has been a triple play, just a small steward of bad people. The Zhou dynasty, where Chu Li was located, and the neighboring Dayan dynasty in the north were originally one dynasty. However, a year ago, the 2 sects of Buddhism and Taoism began a prolonged debate, which was not only about doctrine and orthodoxy, but also about martial arts. The academic disputes were so noisy that many masters at the level of great masters entered the game, setting off a bloodbath in the whole Jianghu. Both Taoist immortals and Buddhist arhat fell. At the time of the death of the old emperor, there was a turmoil within the royal court of the great Zhou dynasty, and the eldest and second princes were engaged in endless struggles for the throne. The 2 religions of Buddhism and Taoism each supported a prince, and they ruled by dividing the original Zhou dynasty into 2. A brand new Dayan dynasty split from each other, creating a situation of north-south confrontation between the Zhou dynasty and Dayan. The southern Zhou dynasty adopted Buddhism as its national religion. The Dayan dynasty to the north revered Taoism. The 2 sides are separated by the Mona River and have been peaceful in recent years. Unfortunately, the emperor of the Zhou dynasty passed away early due to his hard work in government affairs. Now, the one who appears on the throne is the emperor's sister, the 18-year-old princess. This long princess is quite talented. When she ascended the throne at the age of 16, there were various ambitious forces watching closely around Zhou. The imperial relatives, royal families, and even the northern Dayan dynasty were eyeing closely. But they were all suppressed by the eldest princess through thunderous means. It can be seen from this that this long princess has an iron fist and courage in politics. And it is said that Princess Chang has a beautiful appearance, which can be said to be the national color and fragrance. Of course, this kind of thing is just a legend for Chu Li, and with his current strength and status, he naturally did not have the chance to see Princess Chang's respect. Sitting at the table, Chu Li sorted out his thoughts and put on the black uniform of a villain, carrying a long sword around his waist, ready to go out. Now is the hour of Mao, which is the time to go to the brothel to order Mao. Extinguishing the faint candlelight, Chu Li opened the door and was about to leave. Ding! At this moment, a pleasant sound rang out in his brain. Ding! Congratulations to the host, activate the task system, and the system binding is successful. The newbie rewards have been loaded and can now be claimed. Do you want to choose to claim them? System. Gold finger. Chu Li's heart was filled with joy. Was he finally going to make a comeback? I don't know what the reward for this novice is, can you give him a divine weapon? With his thoughts spinning, Chu Li didn't hesitate to choose to claim it. Ding! Successfully claimed, rewards will be distributed. Reward. Tianpin Martial Arts, Tuyan Introduction. The transmission of an ancient great power is a divine skill that solidifies the foundation and cultivates the essence. Chu Li stood still, silently realizing himself. Tuyan. As his thoughts wandered through the system space, he had already understood the origin of this, Tuyan. Tuyan was created by a founder of the Changchun school of Taoism. According to the Taoist tradition of seeking immortality, it involves the absorption and circulation of innate true qi throughout the body, in order to achieve the effect of prolonging life, strengthening the foundation, and cultivating the essence. This skill is not a combat-type skill, but it has a strong auxiliary effect that can strengthen and stimulate one's potential. No matter what one cultivates in the future, it can achieve twice the result with half the effort. With a faint warm current washing herself, Chu Li felt a refreshing sensation. Just as he was reading Tuyan, the technique flowed on its own, and a joyful emotion emerged from the acupoints around his body. The innate true qi in his body moved for a whole week, and his entire state also climbed to the peak. 5 times the day after tomorrow. Chu Li opened his eyes and a glimmer of enlightenment emerged. In such a short period of time, I surprisingly broke through the double small realm and reached the 5th level the day after tomorrow. What an opportunity! Chu Li sighed and clenched his fist, his gaze burning. In a world of great competition, everyone wants to climb up and climb to the pinnacle of martial arts to see the higher scenery. As a traveler, Chu Li is no exception. As his cultivation improved, Chu Li was about to try his sword skills when he heard the clear and melodious sound of a bell ringing outside the door. This was the morning bell in Linen City, announcing the arrival of a new day. Let's go to Jianmao in the evil people's mansion first. Qingming outing and happy reading. Charge 100 and get 500 VIP coupons. Immediate recharge, activity period. April 4th to April 6th. Chapter 2. Reporting from the government offices of bad people. You are listening at novel full.audio. The morning bell is melodious. Chu Li tidied up his robe, carried his sword, and opened the door to walk outside. Linen City was the capital of the Zhou Dynasty, covering a vast area with a population of 1 million. The layout of the households in the city is generally composed of wealthy merchants in the east, nobles in the west, imperial families in the north, and common people in the south. The magnificent palace is located to the north of Linen City, and the powerful princess resides in that city. The mansion of the wicked is located in an inconspicuous alley to the west of Linen City. Chu Li rode a steed equipped by an unscrupulous person and spent half an hour arriving at the mansion. This is a grey and towering building, with high walls that appear inconspicuous from the outside, but naturally carry a sense of authority. On the plaque hanging high in front of the door, there are 3 bold characters with strong character. The villain. It is said that these 3 words were written by Yuan Tiangang, the supreme commander of a wicked person and the immortal great commander. Chu Li tied his horse and came to the door, pulling out his deacon token. The guard in front of the door only glanced lightly without saying much, indicating that Chu Li could enter. Chu Li entered the door, walked through a long corridor, and arrived at the back of the office of the villain. This is a restaurant not equipped by good people, and Chu Li solves his breakfast here every day. At this point, it was getting late and there were many people sitting in the restaurant, chatting in groups of 3 or 2. Chu Li finished his meal and sat down in a seat, silently running the pushing Yanju. The diet of a bad person can be considered good in this world, with a combination of meat and vegetables, as well as some helpful supplements for qi and blood. For martial artists, diet is also a form of cultivation. Chu Li was eating while practicing his martial arts, accelerating the absorption of energy contained in his food to replenish himself. At the same time, ding! You have obtained the Xuanjia sword technique. Biyun sword. Are there rewards again? Chu Li was overjoyed and silently comprehended the system space. In just a short while, the system distributed rewards again, which must be the result of my years of accumulation and hard work. The level of martial arts secret scripts is divided into 4 levels. Heaven, Earth, Xianhuang. This Biyun sword is a Xuanjia swordsmanship, which is not uncommon. I happen to lack such a skill myself. The Tue Yanju is a heavenly level skill, which is naturally rare. Placing his hand on the hilt of the sword, Chu Li naturally felt a sensation in his heart. The blue cloud sword is powerful and powerful, capable of taking life and death. After a moment of silent contemplation, the move of the blue cloud sword had deeply imprinted in Chu Li's mind. It's like having a villain in my mind practicing that sword move one by one. But now I have only learned swordsmanship through observation. If I want to fully absorb swordsmanship, I need to practice it in real combat. Go to the school field later and try the power of this swordsmanship. Chu Li finished his contemplative state and silently thought in his heart. The learning of a martial arts sword move also has levels. At the beginning, it is beginner's level, followed by small success, great success, perfection, and great perfection. Now I am only observing the sword moves of Mobi Cloud Sword in the Sea of Knowledge, and my understanding of this mysterious level martial art can only be said to be an introductory level. Just as Chu Li's thoughts were floating, a loud gong sounded in the front yard, urging all the bad people to gather. Chu Li quickly got up, tidied up and ran towards the front yard. At this point, in the conference hall of the front courtyard, a middle-aged man with a calm and confident face stood with his hand behind his back, his eyes shining brightly. In front of him, the villains quickly gathered in 2 rows. Chu Li stood behind the queue, silent. Seeing that the crowd was almost gathered, the middle-aged man nodded slightly and spoke in a deep voice. I am Yin Tianxi, the protector of the wicked. Today, what I want to say is that a shocking murder case occurred in the city, and it is our duty as bad people to investigate and handle it. Under the rule of the emperor, such incidents have even more negative impacts. The court has issued a death order that the case must be solved within 3 days, otherwise it will be punished according to the law. As soon as he spoke, he immediately cast a layer of gloom over the hearts of the bad people present. This is just a branch of bad people. In theory, the highest level of administration here is the helmsman. But now the headquarters has parachuted a protector directly, which is not help but reflect on its importance. 3 days to solve the case. If you can't break it, you still need to be punished. Don't let me do this hard job, everyone thinks so in their hearts. Yin Tianxi's cold gaze swept across the entire audience and continued. Just before, through drawing lots, we have already selected the responsible personnel for this case, which is 6 cases. As soon as this statement was made, even among those who are accustomed to discipline, there were also some disturbances. Several families are happy, while others are worried. Chu Li in the crowd couldn't help but tremble at the corners of his mouth, with a slightly bitter expression on his face. It won't be so coincidental, will it? I happen to be in 6 places. Why did you just give yourself such a hard job from the beginning? Protector Yin Tianxi did not provide much explanation and also did not disclose further details of the case to the public in order to maintain confidentiality. But after announcing some precautions, they ordered everyone to disband. Only 6 locations were dispatched to investigate the case. Chapter 3. The Zhou Mansion Murder Case. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Several unscrupulous individuals from 6 locations, led by the helmsman Wu Yu, rushed towards the crime site. The pitch-black and luxurious carriage drove through the street, filled with 6 villains with stern expressions and fully armed. On the way to the scene, the files related to this case were also circulated. Chu Li sat in the carriage and carefully read through the file. The case occurred a few hours ago before dawn. The butler of Zhou's mansion discovered a muddy footprint on Tuesday, leading straight to Mr. Zhou's bedroom. Worried about Mr. Zhou's safety, he knocked on Mr. Zhou's door on Tuesday, disregarding etiquette. However, no one agreed for a long time. Feeling that something was amiss, on Tuesday, they quickly called the servants at home and together they burst open the door. But it was discovered that Mr. Zhou had already been killed, even his head had been taken away by the killer, and there was only a headless corpse left on the bed. The general process of the case is like this, and further exploration is required at the scene. As the carriage advanced, the 6 villains arrived at the Zhou prefecture. The villainous helmsman Zhou Yu jumped off the carriage first, with a cold and stern expression, indicating that this case had caused him considerable pressure. If the case is solved properly, then one can naturally be promoted to a higher level, without mentioning various reward resources. But if something goes wrong and you get scolded for reducing your salary, you might end up losing this job. His sharp gaze swept over his subordinates. If you go in, watch carefully and don't miss any clues. If you solve the case, there will be plenty of rewards. Yes. All the wicked people responded with a loud promise. In front of the luxurious decoration of the Zhou mansion, the butler waited here on Tuesday morning. Tuesday is a lean and petite middle-aged man, who is incredibly capable. Watching a group of imposing black-clothed men dismount from the carriage, he was also surprised in his heart. Unexpectedly, it was an unscrupulous person who took over this case directly. Generally, the case is handled by the nearest government office. Are you Tuesday? Wu Yu took a step forward and pressed his palm on the hilt of the sword. Yes, it's just a villain. Tuesday quickly nodded and bowed. Wu Yu just glanced at him lightly without saying much, and called on the bad people under his command to enter the Zhou mansion. Chu Li closely followed in the team, surveying the surrounding environment. At this time, the Zhou mansion had already ushered in a new day, and the maids and servants were busy in an orderly manner, seemingly unaffected by the master's murder. Of course, this can be attributed to the proper management of the butler, who did not cause panic within the mansion, but Chu Li still sensed a slight sense of unease in the atmosphere. Why didn't the crime scene be sealed off, and instead allowed these idle people to enter and exit freely? Chu Li pointed to a group of maids and servants and asked directly. Wu Yulu's gaze showed a hint of doubt, and several unscrupulous people were also slightly surprised. In their impression, Chu Li is a person who speaks very little, and when handling cases, he basically doesn't take the initiative to say anything. But it doesn't matter, as long as it's related to the case, it's natural to brainstorm. Well, the butler hesitated for a moment on Tuesday. The master's death was too tragic. In order to maintain a bit of dignity, the servant had to let these maids in to handle it a bit. Chu Li didn't ask much, but frowned and pondered coldly. Mr. Zhou's body was still parked in the bedroom, and despite his rich experience, when he saw the headless body, his stomach also experienced a tumultuous sensation. A few unscrupulous people just glanced and then turned their gaze away to look at the windows, under the bed, and on the beams of the house where the murderer might be hiding. Chu Li seemed to be completely unaware, but instead squatted in front of the corpse, carefully exploring. As a modern person, he naturally knows the 3 important methods of handling cases: autopsy, surveillance, and witness visits. There is naturally no surveillance in this world, so besides visiting witnesses to seek clues, the examination of the body is an essential part. Sometimes, dead people can convey more information than living people. Wu Yu and others also walked around the bedroom at this time, giving a rough outline of the scene. Wu Yu looked at the traces of damage to the window and gradually realized it in her heart. Last night, the perpetrator sneaked into the Zhou mansion under the cover of darkness, entered through this window, killed Mr. Zhou, and then left. The traces left at the scene clearly indicate this. In my opinion, the perpetrator should be a hired assassin, motivated by money. After committing the crime, he left with his head for this reason, making it easier to verify with the employer and obtain compensation. So, Butler Zhou, what enemies does Mr. Zhou usually have? The butler's eyes rolled and pondered on Tuesday. I can't remember this villain for a moment, but the master's family business is so huge, and there are inevitably some people who offend in the business and official circles. It's not surprising that people hold grudges, but if there are any enemies. Butler, I have a question to ask. At that moment, Chu Li interrupted Butler Tuesday's words. Everyone's gaze was fixed on Chu Li, waiting for his later words. At this moment, Wu Yu's face showed a slight hint of unease. Although it was all for investigating the case, it was still unpleasant to interrupt his conversation with the butler rashly. At this moment, Chu Li appeared to have Chen Zhu on his chest, as he could no longer watch the butler lead the case in the wrong direction. Are you so certain that the deceased is Mr. Zhou? Chapter for the killer, it's you. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Are you so certain that the deceased is Mr. Zhou? Chu Li's words were like a thunderbolt, echoing in everyone's hearts. They suddenly realized that they might have gone in a completely different direction. Focusing too much on the path of the perpetrator's actions, while neglecting the most basic victims. After all, the appearance of the corpse is completely disrespectful, which is really nauseating to look at. Only Chu Li, without any hesitation about the tragic situation of the body, had a clear purpose from the beginning. Sir, that's not right. Isn't this corpse even worse than Mr. Zhou? The butler forced his face. I don't think so. Chu Li snorted coldly and looked around at his colleagues. He reached out and pointed at the fingers of the corpse, attracting everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, please see that the deceased's palms are rough, with calluses on the palms, and even a layer of black mud inside his nails. These are all traces left by years of physical labor. How could a pampered old man have these marks on his hands? As soon as Chu Li's words fell, a bright light suddenly lit up in everyone's hearts, giving people a feeling of transparency. It is indeed strange, which fully indicates that there is something wrong with this corpse. Well, my master is fond of gardening and often personally cultivates a small garden. It's not surprising to have these traces, the butler said nervously on Tuesday. Also, Chu Li didn't pay any attention to him, but continued on, if the killer is a professional assassin, he can naturally kill himself with a single blow, so taking the head level is also a familiar skill. However, you can see that the traces of this headless corpse are full of chopping marks. This indicates that the killer is extremely unprofessional, at least in the path of martial arts, and his knowledge is really limited. We can even boldly speculate that the perpetrator of this case is an acquaintance. Everyone was lost in thought. With reason, evidence, and detailed analysis, Chu Li's inference is very convincing and convincing. So, those are Mr. Zhou's wives and concubines, the butler quickly changed the topic. I've seen something wrong with these lowly maids, but I never expected them to be bold enough to do such a thing. She turned around and was about to leave. Wu Yu extended her hand and grabbed his body. Steward Zhou, you haven't finished speaking yet. Don't rush to leave. Wu Yu's gaze was cold and solemn. Chu Li continued speaking. Manager Zhou, you are the first discoverer on site. According to your description, you discovered unknown footprints this morning, so you have developed suspicion, right? Exactly, the culprit sneaked in from outside, leaving clear footprints in front of the window. The butler panicked and couldn't choose his words. Chu Li took 2 steps and opened the window in the room. Looking out, there were indeed clear and distinguishable footprints on the path leading to the window, which they had noticed when they first entered here. Outside the window, there is an open space, and towards the outside, it is the courtyard wall. Chu Li continued to analyze. According to Steward Zhou, the murderer infiltrated through the courtyard wall and stepped over the open space, so when he entered the bedroom, he also left footprints. But Butler Zhou, have you calculated everything but overlooked one point? Steward Zhou's heart trembled, and his feet felt a bit sore and soft. What? It was the footprints you tried your best to arrange. You should know, it was always sunny last night, and only when it was approaching morning, a light rain started. But what does that mean? A malicious colleague asked, with a hint of solving. At most it can indicate that the killer committed the murder in the morning. Not bad, Chu Li glanced at his colleague, but one thing that doesn't match is the time of the deceased's death. Based on the degree of stiffness and blood clotting of the body, it can be determined that the deceased's time of death was at least yesterday evening, which can indicate that the truth of the case differs greatly from what he appears to be. Chu Li's gaze turned to Butler Zhou, staring fixedly at him. So, we can guess that the housekeeper Zhou who created this mystery and confused the public was not a kind-hearted person. The killer, it's you. As soon as these words were spoken, Butler Zhou's face turned pale and he stood trembling in place. Surprisingly, the culprit is Steward Zhou. All the wicked people fell into contemplation, especially the helmsman Wu Yu, whose thoughts were full of ups and downs. Originally, in their imagination, this case was very tricky and a hot potato. But who could have imagined that in just a short while, the case had appeared, and the biggest suspect in this murder case had also surfaced. Of course, all of this can be attributed to Chu Li's powerful reasoning ability and meticulous personality. Thinking of this, everyone looked at Chu Li with a hint of eagerness. If it weren't for Chu Li, they wouldn't have solved the case and would probably have been punished. Now that the case is successfully resolved, what awaits them is naturally a generous reward and an opportunity for promotion. Chu Li has not completely relaxed, and there are still some mysteries in this case. Steward Zhou, come with us to the bad mansion, Wu Yu said coldly. 2 unscrupulous people will take advantage of the situation and take control of Manager Zhou. Chapter 5. Falling into the net. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Since that's the case, Steward Zhou, why don't you come and visit our bad government office? Listening to Wu Yu's cold words, Butler Zhou was suddenly startled, as if he had been stimulated by something, showing great fear. Bad government office. No, I'm not going anywhere. Housekeeper Zhou tried his best to resist. In the eyes of ordinary people, it is the most terrifying place, like the Senluo hell. It is filled with various criminal laws and strange instruments of torture that force confessions. As long as you come here, you are not afraid of not speaking up, and it will make you unable to survive or die. The people of Linen City, when coaxing children, always say that if you don't listen, you will be locked up in a bad government office. The effect of stopping children's night crying is significant. It is such a terrifying existence that is feared and now appears vividly in front of Steward Zhou. A mournful expression appeared on the butler's face, and then a sudden burst of light erupted in his eyes. His thin and small body suddenly erupted with a strong force, breaking free from the shackles of 2 unscrupulous people. At the next moment, he immediately turned around and jumped out of the window. Want to escape? The bad person instantly reacted and chased outside. Chu Li also drew his sword and followed closely. How could Zhou Butler be a well-trained opponent of bad people? In no time, the path was blocked. With no hope of avoiding, Butler Zhou suddenly showed a hint of ferocity in his eyes, staring fiercely at Chu Li. He did not forget that it was this unscrupulous person who saw through his layout and ruined his efforts. Thinking of this, he no longer evaded, but drew a short sword from under his robe and attacked Chu Li. This sudden incident occurred, and no one had time to react. By the time they saw it clearly, the bright sword light had already reflected on Chu Li's face. Not good. Everyone's heart is tight. They all know Chu Li's skills, and the three realms of the day after tomorrow can only be said to be ordinary. Although Chu Li's reasoning ability is so strong, his cultivation is not prominent. Chu Li has put in the greatest effort to investigate and solve this case. If he makes any mistakes, everyone's hearts will not feel good. The butler Zhou's eyes showed a hint of ferocity. Unlike his seemingly cautious demeanor, this housekeeper Zhou has always been keeping a low profile. His martial arts cultivation is also not low, and he believes that even if he cannot break through the encirclement, at least he can easily pull a cushion. Chu Li's face remained calm, wielding his sword and engaging in battle with butler Zhou. Swords and shadows intertwine. Steward Zhou's sharp sword is due to surprise. After failing the first blow, he fell behind and gradually felt a bit overwhelmed. On the other hand, Chu Li's sword momentum is getting faster and more skillful. Everyone was momentarily stunned. They wouldn't have known that Chu Li had already broken through to the 5th level the day after tomorrow, and among these bad people, he could at least be considered above average. Not to mention that he also has the Xuanjia technique, the azure cloud sword. The blue cloud sword technique emerged in a majestic manner, casting remnants in the air like a gust of wind. With the blessing of the heavenly rank cultivation method's inference formula, Chu Li was able to learn any cultivation method one step faster, and he was even more adept at using swordsmanship. The sword light spread endlessly, overwhelming the mountains and seas, instantly engulfing the steward Zhou. The crowd of delinquents were shocked on the spot, even unable to speak. They wanted to step forward and help Chu Li take the butler next week, but found that Chu Li's swordsmanship was impeccable and there was no place for them to intervene. The difference in strength between the two sides is not significant, and it can even be said that manager Zhou has no strength to fight back. As soon as it was almost over, Chu Li's eyes were focused, and the chi energy around him erupted. Housekeeper Zhou was overturned to the ground. Wrists and ankles have been injured by swords, and it is impossible to escape again. Take it down. Wu Yu ordered in a deep voice. Several unscrupulous people rushed forward and snatched away the housekeeper Zhou. After taking away the housekeeper Zhou, everyone looked at Chu Li. Chu Li, it's thanks to you this time. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have been able to find the clues to solve the case so quickly, said a colleague. Yes, this housekeeper Zhou is too cunning. I don't know what his purpose is to harm Mr. Zhou. Such a person who betrays his master and seeks glory is really despicable. The immediate superior Wu Yu also walked over and slapped Chu Li's shoulder, not hiding his appreciation. Well done. Chu Li did not refuse, bowing to his colleagues as a response. In this world, fighting alone is destined to not last long. If you want to go further, relying on an assistant is essential. It is necessary to join a major force as one's own support. Establishing good relationships with colleagues who are not good will not result in any loss. After conducting a search in the Zhou mansion and inquiring about some relevant maids and servants, the matter was resolved. As a result, everyone from the 6 districts left the Zhou mansion. Everyone rode back to the evil mansion in a carriage. Not long after, news came from the person in charge of interrogation, and the steward Zhou recruited them all. Chapter 6. Settlement Rewards. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Originally, by chance, Mr. Zhou obtained a local level skill. Practicing this skill can give ordinary people with ordinary talents the opportunity to glimpse the path of the master. In this world, treasures and goods are the second most moving, and the most touching is rare cultivation techniques. A high-level martial arts technique is enough to make a small family become a powerful force in a short period of time, which is enviable. After seeing this technique, the butler Zhou had a thought and imprisoned Mr. Zhou, using various threats and temptations, but he never succeeded. In order to prevent others from discovering any changes in the Zhou mansion, Mr. Zhou disappeared for a long time, and if he didn't show a face, others would naturally suspect him. So the housekeeper Zhou casually killed a gardener, cut off his head, and dressed him in the clothes of last week's master, hoping to keep it a secret. After all, he has not yet obtained that martial art from Mr. Zhou, and Mr. Zhou is still unable to die. If it were under normal circumstances, he might have really covered it up, but unfortunately, the person handling the case this time was the most elite detective agency of Zhou. Bad government office, in the lobby. Protector Yin Tianxi's face was full of joy, and his eyes looked at everyone eagerly. In his eyes, these 6 places really surprised him. I thought it was a tricky case, but at such an important time, if there were any slight mistakes, it would be difficult to explain everything. Unexpectedly, in less than half a day, the case was solved, the culprit was arrested, and all confessions were made. Even the victim, Mr. Zhou, was rescued from the hidden dungeon of the Zhou mansion. It can be said that everyone is happy. Everyone, you have made a great contribution and will be rewarded. Yin Tianxi picked up the tea cup in his hand, took a slight sip, and then waved his hand to signal. The 2 unscrupulous people standing behind him stepped forward, tearing open the red cloth on the tray in his hand, revealing a dazzling white color. Silver. Seeing so much silver, the bad people in 6 places, including Chu Li, were breathing heavily. They are not greedy people, but as ordinary deacons, their monthly salary is only 3 taels of silver. If it were a small family to support their livelihood, it would be fine, but they are warriors. Daily cultivation and physical exertion are extremely resource-intensive, which inevitably makes them feel eager. The reward of silver is the most tangible, which can be used to purchase various cultivation resources in the future. It's all adults' promotions that are appropriate. If it weren't for adults giving us this opportunity, we wouldn't have had a way to serve. Wu Yu arched his hand and made a full gesture. This statement also brought joy to Yin Tianxi's heart. After all, no one likes to listen to compliments, let alone in the officialdom. Immediately after, everyone in the 6 locations received rewards for this mission. Each person will record their merits once and receive a reward of 100 taels of silver and 1 pill of Peiyuan pill. Rich, this reward is really too generous. If it were an ordinary task, it would be considered very good to have a few taels of silver. This time, I actually received 100 taels of silver directly. Of course, this was more sponsored by Mr. Zhou to thank the wicked, and there were not as many internal monetary rewards for the wicked. Peiyuan Dan, on the other hand, is a miraculous elixir beneficial for martial arts cultivation, which can solidify the orifices and purify spiritual energy. I really made a lot of money this time. Ding, solve the Zhou mansion case and obtain task rewards. At this moment, the crisp sound of the system also echoed in my mind. Chu Li's expression became solemn and he quickly sat upright. Task reward. Earth level skill, return 10,000 swords to the sect. With the electronic sound, Chu Li's mind suddenly became clear. In the depths of his sea of consciousness, a seemingly carved picture quietly appeared, showcasing the ultimate martial arts technique, which is the earth-level technique, with 10,000 swords returning to the sect. After just observing for a short while, Chu Li felt a surge of broad-mindedness, and his understanding of swordsmanship reached a whole new level. The moves I used to use the Azure Cloud sword before have now been extrapolated and evolved into my own understanding of the meaning of the sword. Just as Chu Lirua had some enlightenment, Yin Tianxi, who was sitting at the top, spoke again. You may not know that the next month will be an extremely important period in the imperial capital's officialdom, Jingcha. Everyone's attention was suddenly drawn away. Yin Tianxi didn't play any tricks and continued speaking. This Jingcha is a system of selecting officials from the capital, held every 3 years. It can be said that the relationship is not significant, so during this period, I personally took charge and commanded the bad people on our side. No wonder he is so cautious about the case now. It turned out that Jing Cha had discovered it, and Chu Li had a clear understanding in his heart. During this period, the underground currents are surging in the capital, and various restless forces will naturally emerge on the surface of the water. Therefore, maintaining public security in the capital is particularly important. Even if it is just a homicide case, it requires multiple parties to participate, including ordinary government offices and organizations of unscrupulous individuals. But now, there have been some new cases in the capital recently. I wonder if you are interested in participating. Could you please bring up these recent and old cases again? Yin Tianxi put down his teacup and looked at the crowd with a burning gaze. Chapter 7. Purchase of Sword. You are listening at novel.Full.audio. As soon as the words were spoken, the room fell silent. Of course, solving a case is good. This not only means generous rewards, but also leaves a strong mark on one's resume, which can lead to promotion in the future. Everyone who has just solved the case has a first-hand experience of this. But if the case cannot be solved, it's not for nothing to take the burden on one's own shoulders. Watching the changing expressions on everyone's faces, Yin Tianxi also understood in his heart and chuckled. Don't worry too much, we villains are organizations directly under the emperor and are only responsible to the emperor. Especially during the current period of Jingcha, we have the power of imperial privilege and special affairs. With this statement, everyone's hearts were stirred. Simply put, during the inspection period in Beijing, there is no need to follow the procedures, as they are responsible for supervising the civil and military officials. This is different from the case of the Zhou government. One is the assigned task, and the other is the patrol and hunting on behalf of the heavens, exercising the power granted by the emperor. This is also because the people in the 6 places performed well in the Zhou mansion case and caught the attention of their superiors, which is why they had this opportunity. If things don't go well, there's no need to take responsibility. After all these years, the case resolution rate has never been high. If that's the case, we can take on more cases. Wu Yu immediately bowed, saying, if that's the case, then please trouble the Lord Protector. I will do my best in all 6 aspects, and I won't accept the heavy trust from the court and lord. Upon hearing this, Yin Tianxi also burst into laughter and brought several files for Wu Yu to choose from. Wu Yu circulated the file to 6 people and followed democratic opinions. After some selection, they chose the Tangmen escort agency case that occurred in Luojiazhuang in the west of the city. It's getting late today, so it's obviously too late to go out of the city to investigate. Therefore, after selecting the case, everyone retired and went to work on their own affairs. So it's time for scatter values. Chu Li and his colleagues went out and chose a luxurious restaurant to enjoy the dishes they usually couldn't bear to eat. But now it's different. Today, just the reward is 100 taels of silver. It has to be said that this delicacy is a great tonic. Chu Li quickly felt his qi and blood surging, just like his daily cultivation. If you can eat high-quality ingredients every day, it naturally has twice the result with half the effort for cultivation. Today, being able to solve the case, Chu Li can be said to have put in the greatest effort. Several colleagues, in order to thank Chu Li, even bought his order. After saying goodbye to each other after finishing their meal, Chu Li came to a blacksmith's shop. There are various famous swords and precious knives displayed here, all of which are made of extraordinary materials. In contrast, Chu Li's standard sword is somewhat overshadowed. To do a good job, one must first sharpen their tools, which Chu Li deeply believed. If there is no suitable weapon, even if the swordsmanship is exquisite, the effect it can produce is extremely limited. I now have the earth-level martial arts and 10,000 swords that belong to my sect. Without a good sword that matches him, how can I do it? Seeing Chu Li picking in front of the shelf, the staff immediately eagerly welcomed him. This guest, what weapon do you want to choose? Our shop has everything you need. Choose me a good sword that requires at least 1,000 forged and refined iron, Chu Li said calmly. Upon hearing Chu Li's words, the staff naturally understood that Chu Li was a skilled swordsman and did not dare to delay. They immediately took out a good sword from the back shelf. Chu Li took it and saw that the black scabbard of the sword hilt was inlaid with gold, indicating an extraordinary demeanor. The sword hilt was slightly unsheathed by an inch, and a bright light was immediately reflected, dazzling the eyes. "Sure enough, it's a good sword." Chu Li exclaimed in admiration, "How can I sell this sword?" 18 taels, my guest, if you have a chance, I'll sell you 16 taels, the waiter said earnestly. Chu Li didn't say much, silently paid the money and had the assistant wrap the sword. After all, for him at this time, 16 taels of silver still have no pressure. If it were in the past, this would have been about half a month's salary for him. How could it not be heartbreaking? Just as Chu Li was leaving the blacksmith shop, a dark figure quietly appeared from the nearby alley and followed behind him. Chu Li returned to his own home, sat cross-legged, silently reflecting on himself. Today he solved a case and obtained the 10,000 swords of the earth-level swordsmanship sect. Now is the time for him to integrate and master it. He silently observed in the sea of consciousness, and the rewards given by the system naturally operated. He took out the Peiyuan pill that was rewarded by a wicked person, looked up, and took it down. The Peiyuan pill melts at the entrance and becomes a warm current, instantly wandering around with all limbs and bones. Chu centrifugal thought of returning to unity, slowly moving his breathing and breathing. With several weeks of movement, his overall strength rose to another level. Reached 6 levels the day after tomorrow. Then, Chu Li returned to the sect with 10,000 swords and practiced observing this earth-level sword technique. The sword came out with an unstoppable momentum, roaring and shaking. The sword was drawn, showing a skillful and smooth flow, and all rivers returned to the sea. With every move, you can receive messages effortlessly. Chu Li's understanding of swordsmanship rapidly increased. For a long time, he opened his eyes with a sharp edge like that of a famous sword. He leaped forward and arrived at the yard, his sword like falling snow, carrying a heart-pounding gust of wind. In his few moves, there is already a hint of the artistic conception of a famous figure. After completing a set, he slowly withdrew his sword and pointed it towards an inconspicuous corner. "Since you're here, show up." Chapter 8. Sword Trial. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chu Li's sword swayed and shot straight towards an inconspicuous corner in the courtyard. As his chi locked in, a dark figure could no longer hide in the dark night, and his figure suddenly appeared, landing step by step in the courtyard. The newcomer was dressed in a nightgown, with a face scarf covering his face. He had a sleek figure and a cold knife in his hand, shining with cold light. Chu Li's eyes narrowed slightly. The visitor is not kind. With the improvement of cultivation, his perception of the environment has also made significant progress. When facing an enemy, the opponent's gaze and the angle of the sword are all captured by their perception. Any wind or grass stirring in the courtyard, even birds flapping their wings and vegetation undulating, could not escape his gaze. As soon as he left the blacksmith's shop, he noticed a tail following behind, but he remained silent. Without him, this stems from confidence in one's own strength. He really wants to know what the man in black is trying to sneak into his own house. "Hee, you made a windfall today. I'm short of money to spend, come find some fun." The man in black had gloomy words and wild laughter, completely ignoring Chu Li. Surprisingly, they came to rob. It seems that I was too generous when purchasing a sword and was targeted by others. But did this robbery grab the head of a bad person? Do you think it's been too long? You are really bold. Do you know who I am? You're asking for death on your own. Chu Li forced one step forward. When a bad person thinks they are too powerful, I'll tell you, when I wander the world like a daytime rat, I never have a free time. Is this man in black a white rat? Chu Li was startled in his heart. He has heard of this name before. There are various types of sea arrest documents within the villains, all of which are used to killing bandits and wandering around. The name of this daytime mouse is among them, which can be said to be infamous. Since that's the case, let's get to the bottom of it. Chu Li no longer spoke much, his internal breathing was in motion, and his sword energy was swirling. The white mouse gave a fierce smile, obviously not taking Chu Li, the wicked deacon, seriously. Chu Li's gaze was firm, and his whole body was focused on swordsmanship. With 10,000 swords, he returned to his sect and launched. When the daytime mouse was still disdainful, he suddenly felt a mountain-like heavy momentum rising in the courtyard, pressing him almost out of breath. This kind of momentum is endless, and the level is extremely high, with an unbreakable power. Sword intent. It's sword intent. The daytime mouse suddenly woke up, and this feeling of being like a light on its back was definitely a sword intent. But how could an inconspicuous little deacon from the other party possibly condense sword intent? No one answered him. At this moment, Chu Li, who was ready to take action, finally moved. The powerful and unparalleled sword intent was unleashed from Chu Li's body without reservation, surging like a great river, flowing incessantly. In this world, thousands of long swords suddenly appeared, suspended above the head of the white sun rat. Chu Li raised his sword towards the sky, and a brilliant light burst forth, cutting through the sky. The invincible sword light reflected on the heavens. Shua, a sense of panic erupted in the eyes of the daytime mouse, but it was too late to dodge. The strong killing intent locked onto him from the beginning. His greatest skill is lightness, and his ability to pick flowers and steal is unparalleled. Even a naturally strong person cannot completely retain him, but there are many shortcomings in actual confrontation with the enemy. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come and become a thief. But at this moment, he was completely stuck in a quagmire, unable to activate his internal breathing, unable to even take a step forward. In an instant, thousands of rays of light descended from the sky, piercing through him. Chu Li withdrew his sword without showing any extra emotions, only silently comprehending. This is his first time using the 10,000 swords to return to the sect, and he has this miraculous effect. The sword intent condensed like a natural flow. These 10,000 swords belong to the sect, more like a domain skill that restricts opponents to a certain space. Wujian is an extraordinary test. This little episode did not cause much trouble for Chu Li. Walking in the martial arts world, carrying exotic treasures is always coveted, which is not uncommon. As the saying goes, a man is innocent and harbors a guilty conscience. After tidying up the traces in front of the house, Chu Li returned to the room and carefully studied his swordsmanship. After a series of trials, his mastery of the 10,000 swords returning to the sect has reached the level of Xiaocheng. Just Xiaocheng has such powerful power. Chu Li couldn't help but feel tempted, and what kind of scenery would it be in the later stage of perfection, and even great fullness? The next day. Before dawn, Chu Li left the door early and went to report to the government office of the bad government. He didn't forget to bring the body of the daytime mouse and received a reward of silver at the bounty pavilion. 10 liang. Although it's not much, a little is better than nothing, at least it can subsidize some household expenses. Chu Li couldn't help but think to himself, if there were a few more petty thieves in the martial arts world who didn't have eyes to provoke him, wouldn't it be that there would be silver rewards brought to his door every day? Today, the bad guys from 6 places are going to Luojiazhuang village in the west of the city to solve the Tangmen escort agency case that occurred here. The personnel quickly gathered and the files related to this case were also distributed. After carefully reading the file, Chu Li's sword eyebrows furrowed slightly. This case is really a bit strange. It can be said that I have only seen it in my life. Chapter 9. Departure from Luojiazhuang. You are listening at Novel Full.Audio. The general process of the case is that 3 days ago, several bodyguards from the Tangmen escort agency escorted escort carts, and when they passed by the Luojiazhuang village, it was already dark. Therefore, they stayed overnight at the Luojiazhuang village that night. However, in the middle of the night, something strange happened, and a scream suddenly rang out in the darkness, awakening everyone. Everyone quickly got up, and after some questioning, they found that the screams came from Miss Luo's bedroom. Miss Luo from the Luo family is in her 20s and 80s, knowledgeable and rational. She is still in her prime. If there is any mishap, then it will be okay. The former head of the Luo family passed away due to illness 2 years ago, and the current head of the Luo family, Luo Xinghe, is the older brother of the Miss Luo family. Luo Xinghe took the lead and led his followers to break open the door of Miss Luo's house. But the scene that followed made everyone at that time stand still. Miss Luo disappeared out of thin air, with only a panicked maid and bloodstains in the bedroom. Miss died. Everyone is in a daze before their eyes. Luo Xinghe suppressed his inner unease and asked the maid what had happened. In the panicked words of the maid, everyone learned about the situation. At night, everyone was already asleep, and the maid living next door suddenly heard some commotion in the young lady's room, such as fighting and cries for help. The maid immediately got up dressed and knocked on the young lady's door. The door opened and a rough man was seen holding on to the young lady, intending to commit misconduct. Miss Luo, who was determined not to comply, bit the man's hand hard. The man became angry with embarrassment and stabbed Miss Luo with a knife, while also knocking out the maid and carrying her away. Luo Xinghe's eyes were about to crack, and he chased along the bloodstains left along the way, all the way to the backyard where the people from the Tangmen escort agency stayed. Luo Xinghe suspected that the members of the Tangmen escort agency had taken Miss Luo's family hostage, but the members of the agency refused to recognize her in any way. The two sides were deadlocked for a moment and were about to erupt into conflict. Finally, the officials arrived and made a compromise by conducting a search on the members of the Tangmen escort agency. It was found that Miss Luo's body was hidden in a box escorted by the Tangmen escort agency. The members of the Tangmen escort agency were subsequently detained, but the truth of the case remains unclear to this day. The Government Office of the Unscrupulous. After reading the file, everyone in the 6 places looked solemn. The Tangmen escort agency was the first escort agency of the Zhou Dynasty, with its business covering the whole country and its influence not to be underestimated. If the people of the escort agency commit murder, it would be a devastating blow to the agency's business and reputation. Therefore, the people of Tangmen escort agency are still operating non-stop, and there are also some doubts about this case, which has been delayed for several days but has not been closed. What do you think of this case? The villain helmsman Wu Yu raised his eyes and looked at everyone. Sir, I think one of the suspicions of this case is that the perpetrator is still hidden in the dark, and even a possible suspect has no face. A malicious person stepped forward and arched his hand. Wu Yu glanced at him, lost in thought. This is a direction. The people from Tangmen escort agency have been checked inside and out several times, but no possible suspects have been found. Does this indicate that the culprit may have infiltrated from outside, rather than being a member of Tangmen escort agency? Everyone was lost in thought and speechless. It is possible that after the incident, the Tangmen escort agency has been working hard. Does this also indicate that they have confidence and fearlessness in their hearts, said another unscrupulous person. The crowd discussed for a while again, but did not say anything about why. After all, only looking at the files can provide limited information. Wu Yu turned her gaze to Chu Li again. He has high expectations for this subordinate. The last Wu Mansion case was solved in a short time thanks to Chu Li's outstanding performance. Sensing the gaze of his superior's bet, Chu Li also bowed slightly. Sir, what is the specific situation? I'm afraid we still need to conduct an actual visit to draw a conclusion. Chu Li gave a conservative response. Wu Yu nodded slightly and didn't say anything more. Chu Li's mind was not without eyebrows and eyes, on the contrary, he just read the file and had some speculations about this case in his mind. But without investigation, there would be no right to speak. Making assumptions recklessly would only allow the complex case to flourish again, so Chu Li remained silent. The only thing that can be seen on the file is text, which is too confusing and can easily lead people astray. With preparations in place, several individuals from the 6 districts under the jurisdiction of the villains arrived at the entrance of the government office. 3 luxurious black carriages have been waiting here for a long time. The carriage is extremely spacious and can accommodate 6 people to ride at the same time. The hanging curtain on the outside bears the emblem of a wicked person. Everyone boarded the carriage one by one, and after the bad driver inspected it, he clenched his fists at Wu Yu, who was leading the carriage, and said, "Helmsman, we are ready to depart at any time." Wu Yu nodded and gestured, "Let's go." With a loud whip sound, the steed pulling the cart took strong and vigorous steps, driving the group towards the direction of Luojiazhuang in the west of the city. Chapter 10. Lord of the Luo Family. You are listening at novel full.audio. The carriage was rattling, and in less than half a day, the group of villains led by Chu Li arrived at Luojiazhuang. After getting off the carriage and looking out, I saw the high gate courtyard of the Luo family village, with beautiful scenery. The entire mansion was vast and occupied a place of feng shui, which was enough to show the heritage of the Luo family. I heard that a bad person is coming to investigate the case again, and everyone in the Luo family has also prepared early. Luo Xinghe prepared a table of dishes, saying that he wanted to clean up the bad people, but it was rejected by Wu Yu. "Lord Luo, we are here to have something important to attend to, and even more so, to uncover the truth about our sister's murder. Before the case shows signs, how could we be too embarrassed to drink and have fun?" This statement was dignified, and Chu Li couldn't help but have a slight admiration for this superior. "Mr. Wu is serious. I'm just trying to show some landlord friendship. If Mr. Wu's official duties are important, it would be better to investigate the case first." "But isn't this case settled? It's the group of martial artists from the Tangmen escort agency who killed the maid." Wu Yu didn't answer him, just raised her cold chin forward. Luo Xinghe maintained his usual demeanor, without showing any awkward emotions, only chuckled a few times, and then instructed the servants of the Luo family to lead the way for the villain. The first place they explored was Miss Luo's boudoir. As soon as you enter the boudoir, you can smell a breathtaking fragrance that makes you feel like you can see spring flowers blooming with dew. Chu Li twitched his nostrils twice and carefully explored the layout of the room. The murder case has been happening for a few days, and the clues left behind are now very thin. Miss Luo's boudoir has also returned to its usual decoration. "Chu Li, if you have anything you want to ask, just ask Lord Luo." Wu Yu smiled and said to Chu Li. He understood in his heart that in order to successfully resolve this case, Chu Li was indispensable. After all, Chu Li's powerful reasoning ability was witnessed by them all. Since that's the case, why not just let go and give Chu Li the initiative to investigate, so that he can quickly find clues? Chu Li responded and walked up to Lord Luo. "Lord Luo, I have something to ask. How is the relationship between your sister and the Lord?" Upon hearing this, Luo Xinghe's expression changed slightly, revealing a hint of displeasure. "What is this? My sister.In.Law and I are siblings of the same mother, and that's a blood thicker than water bond." "Oh, that means Lord Luo only has this sister and no other relatives?" Chu Li continued to ask. Luo Xinghe gave him a meaningful glance and nodded. "Not bad, my father only gave birth to 2 of us siblings." When asked about the information he wanted, Chu Li didn't bother much. Instead, he wandered around the room, examining various clues that could be key to solving the case. After seeing Miss Luo's room, the group went to the backyard, where they had previously stayed at the Tangmen escort agency. Luo Xinghe pointed out to everyone where the body of Miss Luo's family was found. At that time, under the witness of the officials in the yamen, Luo Xinghe opened the box still sealed by the Tangmen escort agency, and Miss Luo lay in it. Who else can affix the exclusive seal of the Tang clan escort agency on goods, except for those within the agency? Therefore, it can be inferred that the Tangmen escort agency is highly suspected. Chu Li just silently listened to Luo Xinghe's narration and didn't say much. Unconsciously, he became the leader of these villains, leading the pace of investigation. After seeing the scene of the incident, Chu Li came to the map of the Luo family again and observed the path from Miss Luo's room to the backyard. "So, do you have any clues?" Wu Yu lowered her voice and whispered to Chu Li. Chu Li nodded slightly and said, "Master, I have some speculations. The next step is to summon witnesses." Wu Yu was taken aback and said, "Are you saying that?" Chu Li looked straight at him and said, "Yes, that maid of Miss Luo's family." Chu Li already had a plan in her heart. In this case, the maid was the first discoverer at the scene, and only she actually witnessed the appearance of the murderer. Due to her testimony, the focus of this case was on the Tangmen escort agency. Therefore, it can be said that in this case, who has the greatest influence is not the young and powerful head of the Luo family, nor the veteran bodyguards of the Tangmen escort agency, but this seemingly inconspicuous maid. This maid is now being supervised in the nearby county government office. Wu Yu has dispatched 2 unscrupulous individuals to be interrogated. Those who hold the unscrupulous person's token can have unobstructed access within the territory of Dazhou, and it directly represents the will of the emperor. In less than an hour, the maid was taken to the Luo family village. Perhaps returning to her hometown, the maid's eyes erupted with a sense of terror, as if she had returned to the night of the horrific murder. These expressions naturally did not escape Chu Li's eyes. "You lowly servant, you haven't taken good care of the young lady. What's the use of you?" As soon as he saw the maid appear, Luo Xinghe's face turned pale and did not show a good expression. Upon being scolded by Luo Xinghe, the maid trembled and cried bitterly. "Sir, this servant's bad roots have not been eradicated, and he must be severely tortured, otherwise he will definitely bite at will." Luoxing spoke to Chu Li with a profound meaning. Chu Li smiled calmly. "Lord Luo, in my eyes, there are no ladies or maids. This is just a witness to the case. Then let the wicked person interrogate you. Of course, Lord Luo, you need to avoid suspicion. Bad people handle cases and are not allowed to observe.